paw-to-paw combat a roaring lion from their backyard. She eyed the backpack. It made her uncomfortable to have the money with her, but she couldn't leave it unattended in their apartment. Not in that part of town. There were times she wished she could live in her head, like Samson did. She watched as he turned and started down the slope. There was a tight circle of eucalyptus trees at the bottom, along the riverbank. He slipped inside. She knew how it looked. What anyone else would have seen. Large, unexplained sums of money, all in cash, a clandestine meeting in the dark, and a teenage boy raised by a sister scarcely older than he was. Anyone who watched crime shows on TV or read the news would have concluded that something illegal was going on. A drug deal or the exchange of stolen goods. It was obvious. It checked all the boxes. The problem for Janey was that the obvious didn't fit the Samson she knew. Not even close. She couldn't picture him with the kind of people who did desperate things. In the rare instances her brother had failed to meet expectations at school or at home, it had never been due to ill intent, but rather to folly, missteps mired in an innocence Samson hadn't outgrown, a rich imagination he seemed unable to rein in. Janey was the one who bent the rules to make their lives work, the one who could have made crime pay, if she'd wanted to. A crisp staccato crack carried through the still night air. In the beat it took Janey to realize it was a gunshot, in quick succession, there were two more. She gasped, a sharp, involuntary intake of breath. Though she'd imagined a lot of things might happen if she followed her brother to the river, none had involved gunfire. She felt a surge of adrenaline as she reached for the backpack to retrieve her phone. But when she thought of the stacks of money inside, she stopped. She replayed as best she could what she'd heard. There'd been no shout, no screams, no evidence of the consequences a bullet in close quarters should yield. Perhaps it was a truck backfiring on the road, some trick of acoustics making it seem as though the sound had come from the river's edge. But as the silence persisted, it felt ominous rather than reassuring. Janey considered, for the first time, what it might mean if her brother had taken the money from people who didn't want to give it up. She'd attended a mandatory assembly on self-defense in high school, something about breaking holds and seeking vulnerable spots, but she couldn't recall anything specific. And at 110 pounds, she doubted she could execute any of the moves with enough force to ward off an attacker. She opened the glove box of the borrowed Corolla. Beneath loose papers, she found a hairbrush and a travel-size can of hairspray. She briefly assessed the small silver canister's possibilities as a defensive weapon. It didn't inspire confidence. She reached for the backpack again, this time following through on extracting her phone, although not to make a call. She checked her messages. There was nothing from Samson, neither reassuring as she'd hoped, nor desperate as she'd feared. She used the phone's light to look under the seats and on the floor in the back, finding only loose change and a flattened to-go coffee cup. Reluctantly, she returned to the hairspray. Pressing down on the cap produced a burst of dense, sticky droplets with a harsh chemical smell. If she was able to score a direct hit in the gunman's eyes, it could be briefly incapacitating. Giving her time to... Time to what? Wrestle away his weapon? It was a bad plan. Janey knew that, even as she palmed the can and got out, pausing only to lock the door behind her. It seemed a far worse one when a man emerged from the trees in the spot where Samson had gone in. Janey froze. But as the stranger made his way up the hill, the panic in her brain took a more functional route, ordering her body to drop to a crouch. Kneeling awkwardly, one hand on the ground for balance, the other holding the hairspray at the ready, she watched, transfixed, as the man drew closer. About 10 feet from the walkway, he stopped. Abruptly, he shook his head hard, twice to the right, an odd motion. It could have been an involuntary tic, but Janey wondered if it was an expression of the man's dismay, even disgust, at whatever he'd just seen or done. As though he might roll back the events of the night if he could only shake his head no hard enough. She lost interest in interpreting the stranger's body language.